For decades, the promise was straightforward. Work hard, pay national insurance, save into a pension, own your home, and retirement would take care of itself. But for more than 4 in 10 older workers across Britain, that promise is breaking. Not because they failed to plan, but because forces beyond their control are pushing them out. What's behind it strikes at the very foundation of how retirement in this country was supposed to work. This foundation was built on an unwritten agreement, a lifetime of economic contribution in exchange for late-life security. For generations of British workers, from the industrial valleys of Wales to the suburbs of London, this social contract held firm. But today, the mechanism is fracturing. While no single official government statistic captures forced retirement under a single category, a series of independent investigations indicate a consistent, troubling trend. Data from the University of Bristol, Allianz, and wider pension industry analyses converge on the same warning. Roughly 40% of retirees are leaving the workforce earlier than they planned. The consequences of these premature exits extend far beyond the individual. When a worker is pushed out, the financial shockwaves ripple through families. Spouses are forced to renegotiate their own working lives. Adult children find themselves providing unexpected support, and public services face immediate, unplanned pressure. What was once a private disappointment is now a systemic challenge, testing the very idea of what it means to grow old in modern Britain. For many, the exit from the workforce does not begin with a formal retirement party or a planned farewell. It starts as a quiet crisis of household cash flow. Years before any decision is made to leave a job, the monthly balance sheet begins to buckle under the weight of everyday living. Energy bills, food inflation, rising council tax and mortgage rate hikes steadily erode the earnings of workers in their 50s and early 60s. This is a generation caught in a multi-front financial squeeze, often balancing stagnant wages and personal debt with the costs of supporting adult children and caring for elderly parents. With no room to spare, even a minor shock can upend their entire plan. The scale of this pressure is documented. Data from the Office for National Statistics reveals that 90% of people aged 50 and over reported an increase in their household costs, while 49% saw their savings decline. This leaves almost no financial buffer to rebuild pension pots in the final decade of their working lives. When a crisis hits under these conditions, it triggers what economists call involuntary retirement, leaving work earlier than intended because circumstances, rather than personal choice, dictate the timeline. This is a forced departure driven by redundancy, sudden caring responsibilities, employer pressure, or structural shifts in the local labour market. When these pressures collide, the option to keep working simply disappears, turning a cash flow problem into a permanent exit. For millions of British workers, the boundary between active employment and forced retirement is defined entirely by physical and mental endurance. Currently, 3.7 million adults are balancing paid employment with a medical condition that restricts the type or amount of work they can perform. An identical number have already been pushed out of the labour market entirely for that exact reason. The slide from a manageable diagnosis into a job-ending crisis often accelerates when the healthcare system stalls. In a recent NHS snapshot, just 62% of patients started consultant-led treatment within the target 18 weeks. For those waiting on orthopaedic, cardiac, or psychiatric pathways, delays drag on for months. Currently, 171,000 people have been waiting over a year for elective care. In physically demanding sectors like construction, delivery driving, and factory work, musculoskeletal damage or cardiovascular disease makes continuing impossible without rapid medical intervention. In retail or self-employed trades, where occupational health support is virtually non-existent, a worsening condition like diabetes or obesity-related joint pain leaves workers with no choice but to stop. Even in white-collar environments, prolonged mental health strain and burnout frequently snap the final ties to the office. When timely treatment is unavailable, a treatable illness becomes a career-ending event. For others, the exit has nothing to do with physical decline. It is driven by corporate restructuring, cost-cutting, and rapid technological shifts. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows that 15% of workers over 50 who left the workforce did so because of dismissal or redundancy. In a labour market rapidly deploying artificial intelligence and automation, employers increasingly value immediately applicable digital skills over decades of experience. Older staff are frequently left behind. They statistically receive the least on-the-job training of any demographic. While the Equality Act of 2010 makes age discrimination illegal, the reality of finding a new role in later life is stark. Older applicants routinely struggle to secure interviews or land roles with comparable pay. When a factory closes or a retail chain restructures, redundancy represents more than the loss of immediate employment. It collapses the bridge to later life earnings, leaving displaced workers with no viable way back. The risk of early departure varies sharply across the United Kingdom. In London and the South East, higher lifetime wages and strong property values provide a safety net, with working-age households holding a median wealth of £1.25 million. But in the North East, Yorkshire, the valleys of Wales, and former industrial towns like Redcar, the economic reality is starkly different. Decades of industrial decline have left these regions with weaker labour markets and lower median incomes. Because auto-enrolment pension contributions are tied directly to earnings, lower wages throughout a working life result in much smaller pension pots. In these communities, a sudden redundancy or health shock is rarely manageable. Without reliable public transport or local job opportunities, it almost always translates into a severe, permanent exit from the workforce. The UK's retiree to working age ratio is projected to rise from 0.38 to 0.45 by 2034, squeezing the tax base while driving up public spending on healthcare, pensions, and social care. To manage this strain, the state pension age remains at 66, with a scheduled increase to 67 in 2028. However, this state benefit functions only as a foundation, not a complete retirement solution. Although workplace auto-enrolment has vastly expanded pension coverage, it has not closed the adequacy gap, leaving millions of future retirees exposed to the systemic limits of national policy. While the national average pension pot at retirement stands at £185,000, this mean figure distorts the everyday reality. In truth, 16% of British retirees enter this stage with absolutely zero pension savings. Another 21% hold less than £50,000, an amount that quickly vanishes under modern cost pressures. This leaves many households underestimating the actual income required to maintain their basic standard of living. For those who own property, the situation presents a different struggle, being asset-rich but cash-poor. Significant home equity frequently coexists with a very weak daily income. Attempting to bridge this gap through downsizing, equity release, or later life borrowing is often presented as a straightforward fix, but these options carry high fees, long-term debt risks, and no guarantee of security. Alongside the financial shock, losing workplace routine and social purpose takes an immediate emotional toll. Affordability varies wildly by geography. A modest retirement in London, Manchester, or Birmingham requires different resources than in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Cardiff, and Belfast, where lower costs stretch pension incomes further. While some adapt by downsizing, retraining, or managing frozen tax thresholds on their investments, younger generations face a far more hostile path, squeezed by high housing costs, student debt, and insecure gig contracts. Over the next decade, retirement security will depend heavily on economic growth, healthcare reform, and pension policy. Today, the quiet departure of older workers is reshaping British society. With the traditional finish line out of reach for so many, we face a challenging question. Has a secure retirement become a privilege for the few, rather than an expectation for the many? Share your thoughts below.